The grand lobby of Whitford International glittered with marble and glass, a place built to impress foreign investors and remind employees of their place. Clara Hughes, 30 years old and plus size, walked through those doors every morning with her head lowered. She wasn't a secretary or an assistant, at least not officially. She was a cleaning woman, assigned to keep the executive floor spotless. But even here, in her uniform and sneakers, people judged her before she said a word. Too heavy to move fast, someone once whispered. She heard it all, swallowed it, and kept walking with her mob. Clara had learned to make herself invisible, blending into polished walls, ignoring smirks from junior staff who thought their tailored suits made them superior. She had studied people's habits, the way managers avoided eye contact, how executives only greeted those they thought important. She had never been greeted. To them, she was background. But Clara had a secret. While scrubbing floors and wiping windows, she listened. She listened to meetings in English, French, and Spanish, catching words that no one realized she understood. Languages had been her passion since childhood, a skill she had buried when life demanded survival. One Monday morning, the air buzzed with anticipation. A delegation from Europe was arriving, and the CEO himself, Jonathan Whitford, was flying in to lead negotiations. Clara noticed how frantic the staff became, papers flying, ties being adjusted, nervous glances toward the elevator. She quietly polished the brass handles, unseen, absorbing every word. The translator canceled. Brenda from HR hissed. "What are we supposed to do? Mr. Whitford will fire someone." Clara's cloth froze mid-wipe. A translator? For French? Her heart thudded. She could do it. She wanted to shout it out, but she knew what Brenda would say. "Don't be ridiculous. Look at you." The delegation arrived with the sound of leather shoes on marble. Men and women in tailored suits, carrying portfolios, speaking rapid French as they entered the conference room. The staff smiled nervously, pretending to understand. Jonathan Whitford followed, tall, composed, presence, filling the room like a command. His sharp eyes scanned the staff, then flicked toward the empty chair reserved for the translator. "Where is she?" His voice was calm, but the steel underneath made Brenda stammer. "Unforeseen problem, sir." Jonathan's brow furrowed. "Unacceptable. We cannot appear incompetent in front of our guests." One of the delegates chuckled in French, thinking no one understood. Americans, always unprepared. Laughter followed. Clara, standing near the wall with her cleaning cart, felt her face burn. She clenched her rag, the words searing her chest. She could answer them, she could prove them wrong, but her throat locked. What if they laughed harder? What if Jonathan himself dismissed her? She stayed silent, heart pounding, as she watched the CEO's jaw tighten. He hated mockery. She could see it in the way his eyes darkened, though he said nothing. The meeting began in awkward half gestures and forced smiles. Brenda tried to improvise. "Maybe one of you studied French?" she asked the staff desperately. A young man raised his hand weakly. "Just 2 years in college." He attempted a sentence and mispronounced it so badly that one delegate laughed outright. The humiliation was thick in the air. Jonathan's expression grew colder. He turned to Brenda, voice sharp. "Find a solution. Now." Brenda's eyes darted around the room. For a second, they landed on Clara. Then she scoffed, shaking her head, muttering under her breath, as if she could help. Clara's cheeks flamed, humiliation slicing deeper than usual. Jonathan heard the mutter. His gaze followed Brenda's glance, landing on Clara. She froze, clutching her rag like a shield. He studied her uniform, her trembling hands, her rounded figure that others mocked so freely. But his voice was steady. "You, step forward." The room turned, eyes widening. Clara's heart nearly stopped. "Me, sir?" she whispered. Jonathan nodded once. "You understand French?" Every instinct screamed to deny it, to run. But the years of swallowing her voice suddenly seemed unbearable. She lifted her chin, though her hands still shook. "Yes, sir, I do." The room erupted in disbelief. Brenda laughed outright. "She's the cleaner." She probably picked up a few words from soap bottles. The staff snickered. Clara's stomach twisted, but Jonathan silenced them with a look so sharp it cut the air. "Translate," he commanded, gesturing to the delegate who had mocked earlier. The man smirked, rattling off a string of complicated French about tariffs and trade agreements, confident the woman before him would collapse in shame. Clara inhaled deeply, steadied her voice, and translated, fluent, precise, every technical term exact. Silence fell. The smirk faded from the delegate's face. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in intrigue. "Impressive," he murmured. Then, louder, "Continue." The meeting resumed, now with Clara standing at the head of the table, translating each sentence seamlessly. Her nerves melted into rhythm, her voice steady, her posture straighter with each word. The delegates, initially mocking, now nodded respectfully, impressed by her fluency. Staff members exchanged stunned glances. Brenda's face burned crimson. For once, Clara wasn't invisible. She was indispensable, and she felt it like a flame catching at last. She belonged here not as background, but as someone who had value no one could deny. As the hours passed, Clara grew bolder. She didn't just translate words, she carried tone, nuance, subtle sarcasm. Delegates leaned toward her, trusting her voice. Jonathan watched closely, his sharp gaze softening slightly each time she handled a tricky phrase with elegance. For a man known for his ruthless standards, he showed something unusual, something like admiration. By the time the meeting ended, agreements were signed, and the French delegates shook Clara's hand with genuine respect. "Mercy, mademoiselle," one said warmly. Clara flushed, murmuring back in flawless French. For once, she wasn't mocked. She was honored. The room emptied, leaving Clara clutching her rag again, suddenly self-conscious. Had she overstepped? Would Jonathan scold her for daring to stand where she didn't belong? She began to gather her card when his voice stopped her. "Wait." She froze. He approached slowly, his footsteps deliberate, his presence overwhelming up close. "You didn't tell anyone you could do this," he said. Not a question, a statement. Clara swallowed. "No one ever asked, sir." He studied her face. Unreadable. "Or perhaps you knew they'd dismiss you if you tried." The words pierced her because they were true. Brenda reappeared, bristling. "Sir, we can't rely on staff like her for such delicate matters." Jonathan's eyes turned icy. Staff like her? His voice was lethal in its quietness. "She saved this meeting. Without her, we would have been humiliated. Tell me, Brenda, what exactly did you contribute today?" Brenda's face drained of color. I coordinated the schedules and failed," Jonathan interrupted. Clara succeeded. Learn the difference. Clara's eyes widened. No one had ever defended her like that, certainly not against someone powerful. She lowered her gaze, hiding the tears burning her eyes. Jonathan turned back to Clara. "From today forward, you report to me directly. We'll discuss details later." Her mouth fell open. "Sir, I'm just a cleaner." His expression didn't soften. "Not anymore. You're more than that, and I won't waste talent." The words stunned her. Around them, staff whispered furiously, their hierarchy shattered by this moment. Clara clutched the edge of her cart, trembling. She wanted to believe him, but part of her feared it was a dream she would wake from, still invisible. Yet the weight in his tone told her this was no dream. It was real. The rest of the day blurred. Clara finished her shift mechanically, though every nerve buzzed. Staff avoided her eyes, unsure whether to sneer or respect her. Some whispered, "Teacher's pet." Others, "Lucky break." Clara ignored them, her mind replaying Jonathan's voice. "You're more than that." She had lived her life trying to prove she was enough, always dismissed for her body before her mind. Now, someone powerful had not only noticed her, but defended her. She didn't know if it was gratitude, fear, or something else that kept her heart racing long into the night. That evening, Clara returned to her small apartment on the city's edge. She peeled off her uniform, staring at herself in the cracked mirror. Same curves, same round face, same body she had been taught to hate. And yet, it no longer looked quite the same. Because today, her voice had mattered. Today, she had stood in a room where she was never meant to stand, and she had not only survived, she had shone. She whispered to her reflection, "You are more than what they see." For the first time, she believed it might be true. The next morning, Clara entered the building with her head a little higher. Whispers followed her, but so did glances of respect. Even the receptionist, who usually ignored her, offered a hesitant smile. She rolled her cart toward the elevators, but before she could step in, an assistant stopped her. "Mr. Whitford asked for you." Her heart leapt. Now? Now. She abandoned the cart, palms sweating, and followed the assistant to the executive suite. The carpet was thick, the air perfumed with wealth. She had walked these halls countless times with her mop, but never like this. Jonathan's office loomed large, walls of glass framing the skyline. He stood behind his desk, reviewing documents. When she entered, he looked up immediately. Clara. Just her name, yet it landed like acknowledgement. She clasped her hands nervously. "Sir, if yesterday was inappropriate, I apologize." His brow furrowed. "Inappropriate? You saved us millions. Do not apologize for competence." She flushed, lowering her gaze. "I just didn't want to overstep." His tone softened slightly. "The only thing you overstepped was your own doubt." She blinked, stunned by the gentleness beneath his sternness. No one had spoken to her that way. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." She obeyed cautiously, the leather swallowing her small confidence. He slid a document toward her, a non-disclosure agreement. "I'm assigning you temporarily as interpreter for our European division. It will require discretion. If you accept, the salary is triple your current pay." Clara's breath caught. Triple. Her hands trembled as she touched the paper. "Sir, why me?" His gaze held hers steadily. "Because you're the only one I trust after yesterday." Her throat tightened. Trust. A word she had never earned from anyone in power. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. Clara signed. Her signature, shaky but bold. Jonathan nodded once, satisfied. "Good. We'll begin training tomorrow." She rose, clutching the pen like a relic. Before she left, he added, "And Clara ignored the whispers. People mock what they fear. They'll learn." She froze, his words sinking deep. Then she nodded, unable to speak. Walking out of that office, she felt lighter, as if the marble floors no longer tried to crush her under their shine. For once, the building didn't feel like a prison. It felt like the beginning of something she had long thought impossible. That night, Clara lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside, but inside, her world was shifting. She remembered Brenda's laugh, the delegates' mockery, her own trembling hands. She remembered Jonathan's voice, steady and unwavering. And she realized that for the first time, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Tomorrow, she would walk back into that building not as invisible staff, but as someone with purpose. And though doubt whispered still, another voice spoke louder. "You're more than that." Clara hugged herself in the dark, smiling through tears. The story was only beginning. The next morning, Clara arrived earlier than ever, her nerves buzzing like static. She wore her cleanest blouse under the company-issued jacket, her resume tucked in her bag, though no one had asked for it. As she entered the executive wing, she caught the stairs, secretaries pausing, assistants whispering. The cleaner was walking past them without a mop, summoned to the inner circle. Clara's cheeks heated, but she kept moving. She reminded herself of Jonathan's words, "You're more than that." She clung to them like a shield, though doubt still nipped at the edges of her resolve. Jonathan greeted her in his office with his usual sharp efficiency. "We'll start with terminology," he said, sliding thick folders across the desk. They were filled with contracts, trade agreements, and industry jargon, half in English, half in French. Clara's stomach tightened. The pages looked endless, but she nodded firmly, settling into the chair across from him. He watched her carefully. as though testing not only her knowledge but her endurance. I don't expect perfection, he added. I expect effort. That word effort echoed in her chest. Effort was something she knew. She could give that endlessly. The training days blurred into long hours. Clara translated until her throat was raw, writing vocabulary lists late into the night, her small apartment filled with scattered papers. Sometimes exhaustion made her doubt, but then she remembered the moment Jonathan had silenced Brenda, the pride in his eyes when she spoke fluently, and she pushed forward. He corrected her mistakes, sometimes sharply, but never cruelly. Instead of mocking her body, he demanded her mind. For the first time, someone powerful was telling her she was worth the work. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. The others in the office weren't as generous. Whispers trailed her like smoke. Teacher's pet, some muttered. Others sneered. She'll never last. Look at her. Brenda, humiliated from before, became colder still, her smiles like knives. She began accidentally excluding Clara from meeting invites, sending her the wrong room numbers, even spilling coffee near her seat during breaks. Clara swallowed each slight, refusing to retaliate. She had endured worse in her life, but every evening, Jonathan would stop by with one question: "What did you learn today?" And when she answered, his nod reminded her that whispers didn't decide her future. Her first true test came faster than expected. A surprise call arrived from Paris, an urgent negotiation about shipment delays. Jonathan glanced at Clara. "You're on speaker." Her heart lurched. She wasn't ready, but his steady gaze anchored her. She took a deep breath, translating swiftly between the French executives and Jonathan's clipped responses. At first, her voice trembled, but as the call continued, rhythm carried her. By the end, she had navigated complex terms about tariffs and deadlines without faltering. When the call ended, Jonathan simply said, "Good," but the faint upward curve of his lips was worth more than applause. That evening, alone in her apartment, Clara allowed herself a rare indulgence. She ordered takeout not out of stress, but celebration. For once, her sighs didn't feel like shame. It felt like evidence she had lived, endured, persisted. She sat by the window, eating slowly, savoring the moment. She whispered to herself, "You did it." Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness but relief. She had carried a conversation that mattered to millions of dollars, and though her neighbors might see just another tired woman in cheap clothes, she knew better. She was becoming someone no one could ignore. Weeks passed, and Clara's confidence grew. She translated meetings with fluency, briefed Jonathan before calls, even corrected minor errors in documents that others overlooked. Slowly, staff who once sneered began to rely on her. A junior associate asked timidly for help with a French memo. Another invited her to join their lunch table. Clara was cautious, wary of false kindness, but she accepted. She was learning that respect was not given freely, it was earned fiercely. And though the sting of mockery still haunted her, each success dulled its bite. She was rewriting her story, word by word. But Brenda did not relent. She bided her time, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. It came one afternoon during a high-profile negotiation with Swiss investors. Brenda forgot to deliver Clara's prep materials, leaving her to walk into the meeting blind. Panic surged as documents were slid across the table in rapid French, filled with terms she hadn't reviewed. Sweat prickled her skin. But when Jonathan glanced at her, she forced herself to breathe. She focused, listening intently, piecing meaning together. Her translations weren't flawless, but they were steady. She survived the meeting. Brenda's smirk faltered. Afterward, Jonathan summoned Clara to his office. She braced for criticism. Instead, he leaned back, studying her. "You handled that well." She blinked. "I made mistakes." He nodded. "Yes, but you didn't crumble. That matters more." His words sank deep, stronger than praise. She realized then that perfection wasn't his demand. Resilience was. For years, she had believed mistakes proved she was worthless. But Jonathan was teaching her that survival, persistence, and courage in the face of failure were greater strength. For the first time, she felt her flaws could coexist with her worth. Her bond with Jonathan deepened quietly. He wasn't warm, at least, not in the way movies painted billionaires. But his respect was steady, his trust unshakable. Sometimes, during late nights in the office, they shared coffee in silence, comfortable without needing to fill the air. He asked about her studies, her past, her dreams. She was hesitant at first, but slowly she revealed pieces. The scholarship she lost, the father who told her she'd never succeed, the endless years of invisibility. Jonathan listened without pity, only intent. They were wrong, he said simply one night. Don't live by their mistakes. Still, Clara wrestled with her own doubts. One morning, as she walked past the polished glass, she caught her reflection. Same curves, same roundness, same woman who had been mocked endlessly. For a moment, shame resurfaced. But then she remembered the boardroom nods, the French delegates' respect, Jonathan's steady gaze. She whispered, "You're not less." And for once, the mirror didn't argue. She squared her shoulders and kept walking. Confidence didn't erase fear, but it made fear survivable, and she was learning to live with both. A turning point came during a gala hosted by Whitford International. Clara had been assigned to accompany Jonathan as his interpreter, though she insisted she didn't belong among gowns and tuxedos. He dismissed her protest. "You belong where your skills are needed." That night, under chandeliers and whispered judgment, she translated flawlessly, moving between conversations like she had always belonged. At one point, she overheard a guest murmur, "Is that the cleaner?" Another replied, "No, that's Whitford's interpreter." The words sent a shiver down her spine. For the first time, her identity wasn't defined by what she lacked, but by what she contributed. Brenda tried one last scheme. She whispered to colleagues that Clara was only close to Jonathan because of pity, or worse. Gossip spread like wildfire, snickers trailing her down hallways. Clara nearly broke under the weight. But Jonathan confronted the rumors directly during a staff meeting. If anyone questions why Miss Hughes is here, the answer is simple. Because she's the best at what she does. End of discussion. His words silenced the room. Clara sat frozen, cheeks burning. He hadn't just defended her, he had stamped his authority on her worth. No one dare mock her openly again. From that day, Clara walked differently. Not with arrogance, but with assurance. She greeted colleagues without fear, contributed ideas during briefings, and even trained junior staff on cross-cultural etiquette. Slowly, the office shifted. Where once there was scorn, now there was quiet admiration. She became a symbol not of pity, but of possibility. And though whispers still lingered in shadows, Clara no longer cared. For every sneer, there were 10 nods of respect. For every doubt, there was Jonathan's unwavering faith. She was no longer invisible. She was undeniable. Her relationship with Jonathan remained professional, but beneath it lay something unspoken. She caught his glances, sometimes softer than expected. He lingered when she spoke, his sharpness easing into quiet admiration. Clara tried to ignore the flutter in her chest, reminding herself that he was her employer, untouchable. Yet part of her wondered, did he see her only as talent, or something more? She buried the thought, focusing on her work. But late at night, when she replayed his words, his nods, his rare smiles, her heart whispered a truth she wasn't ready to admit. She was beginning to care. Months passed, and Clara's role solidified. She was no longer the cleaner. She was Whitford International's interpreter, cultural advisor, and quiet force. Her salary lifted her out of poverty. Her dignity lifted her out of invisibility. Yet she never forgot where she had started. Sometimes she lingered by the janitor's closet, remembering her cart, her mop, the days of silence. She whispered to herself, "You climbed." And that reminder kept her humble determined never to lose the empathy she had gained in hardship. For she knew what it meant to be overlooked, and she would never overlook anyone else. One evening, as she packed her notes, Jonathan entered her office. "You've done more than I expected," he admitted. She smiled nervously. "Is that good?" His lips curved faintly. "It's extraordinary." He hesitated, then added, "Clara, I know I'm not easy to work for, but you've never flinched. Why?" She looked at him, startled. Then, slowly, she said, "Because you saw me when no one else did, and that's not something I could ever walk away from." His eyes softened, and for a rare moment, silence felt heavy with possibility. Then he nodded once and left, leaving her heart racing. That night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She realized that her story wasn't just about being fat, mocked, or underestimated. It was about resilience, the refusal to be silenced, the courage to use her voice. She thought of all the women who had been told they weren't enough, and she whispered into the dark, "We are." The words steadied her like armor for tomorrow. Because she knew the world wouldn't stop judging, but she also knew she had the strength to keep proving them wrong. And perhaps, just perhaps, she had found someone who believed it too. By the end of her first year at Whitford International, Clara's reputation stretched far beyond the office. Clients requested her by name, executives relied on her expertise. Even Brenda had learned to stay silent. And Jonathan? He continued to watch her with the same steady respect, though the air between them grew warmer, heavier with unspoken words. Clara didn't know what the future held, but she knew this. She was no longer defined by her size, her uniform, or others' mockery. She was defined by her skill, her perseverance, her courage. On a quiet Friday evening, after a long week of meetings, Jonathan walked her to the elevator. For once, his stern expression softened into something almost gentle. "You've changed this company, Clara," he said quietly. She blinked, stunned. "Me?" He nodded. "You reminded us that worth isn't about image. It's about substance." The elevator doors opened, and Clara stepped inside, her heart full. As the doors closed, she whispered to herself, "You are more than that." And she believed it, wholly, fiercely. For the woman who once scrubbed floors unseen was now walking into a future that finally belonged to her.